So you're looking for an Alice keyboard, but there's so many to choose from. So let's compare two for today. We're going to be comparing the high-tier Keychron Q8 versus the more budget-friendly Feker Alice 80 to see how well they go against each other, so let's get right into it. So right off the bat, both these keyboards are available in a fully assembled version or a bare bones version with these respective prices. And you can see that the Feker Alice 80 is around $70 cheaper in every regard, which is a huge selling point. But let's get into the details to see whether each keyboard is worth it or not. Starting with the build, the Keychron Q8 is a 65% gasket mount keyboard and has the standard quality you expect with a fully anodized aluminum build. Meanwhile, the Alice 80 is also a gasket mount keyboard of the same size, but is just made out of plastic. But it does have some added features like a built-in 2.4G receiver holder and 2 levels of kickstand feet. The body is also raised in the middle like those Logitech Ergo keyboards, while the Q8 is just flat. The volume knob on both keyboards is also a tactile button, made out of metal and is stepped, so you've got some pretty good control, with the Q8 being a little better in quality because it has a textured side. On the back of the Q8, there's a USB-C port and a metal switch to change operating systems on the left side, while the Alice 80 has 2 plastic switches to change OS and to turn on wireless connectivity in the middle. The general layout of both keyboards is pretty similar, but you can see that the Q8 is slightly smaller thanks to a noticeably tighter spacing in the middle. And I'm not sure if it's because of the limitations of metal and plastic, but the Alice 80 just looks better to me with the smoother cutouts and even spacing. Meanwhile, the Q8 has keys in different angles all over the place and doesn't seem very refined with all these gaps in between keys. And surprisingly, that's pretty common amongst other expensive Alice keyboards too. Anyways, on the bottom row, the Q8 has 8 keys while the Alice 80 has 7 keys, but on the right side, the Q8 has 2 keys while the Alice 80 has 3 keys, and also has a slew of indicators since it has tri-connectivity while the Q8 is just wired. Next are the keycaps. For the fully assembled versions, the Q8 uses OSA PBT keycaps which give off a more rounded shape, while the Alice 80 uses cherry profile PBT keycaps. Both are non-shine through and are decently resistant to shine, which is always nice. And underneath both keycaps, we have Gateron G Pro switches. With the Q8, you get to select 3 different switches, blue, red, and brown, while the Alice 80 only has yellow switches. The switches on the Q8 seem to only have the standard switch housing, while the yellow switches on the Alice 80 have the better ones with the magnified top housing for better LED diffusion. Both keyboards are quote-unquote pre-lubed, but to the smallest degree, so don't expect too much. Speaking of lube, all the stabs on these keyboards here are pre-lubed, and even though there doesn't seem to be much, they sound pretty decent with almost no rattle, so let's transition to the sound test. As expected, both these keyboards have south-facing hot swappable sockets with 5-pin support, along with RGB lighting, with the Alice 80 looking more favorable in this category thanks to the translucent white layers, and this is all you need to see to understand why one is better than the other. Now let's move to modding flexibility. The Q8 is easily accessible through the hex screws on the back, revealing that there is just an over-glorified tape mod surface with gasket mount foam on the sides, and that's literally it. So you could add some extra case foam or plate foam to further dampen this keyboard. But for the Alice 80, it's closed off pretty tightly even with just plastic clips. But the inside is absolutely remarkable because you have gasket foam everywhere, removable silicone bumpers, and thick silicone layers for the plate and the case for maximum dampening, which you definitely heard in the sound test. You're getting all of this for $110? This is absolutely a steal of a price for what's in here. There's definitely not much modding required because it's jam-packed with silicone and foam. For wireless connectivity on the Alice 80, just pop the switch on the back and use functions C, V, and B for the 3 simultaneously connected Bluetooth devices, or just use the 2.4G receiver. As for software, the Q8 is fully compatible with QMK and VIA, while the Alice 80 has its own software for remapping keys and RGB lighting, but of course in the grand scheme of things, nothing is more superior than QMK and VIA in terms of customizability. Lastly, we'll talk about the issues, and thankfully there's just one. It's quite minor, but it's also a huge deciding factor of which keyboard you'll end up getting, and it's something to look out for in all Alice keyboards, and that issue is the spacebar placement. The Keychron Q8 is a great keyboard, but the minute I started typing on it, I knew something felt wrong. Check out the right spacebar on the Q8. The spacebar ends at the N key, but on the Alice 80, it ends in the middle of the B key. On a regular keyboard, my hands naturally have my thumb between B and N, so you can probably see where this is going. Because I'm a touch typist, I don't need to look at the keys when I'm pressing, and my thumb is naturally in this particular stance. And my thumb in particular is actually right on the edge of the spacebar and this function 2 key, which is not very good because for the most part, my thumb just ends up slipping over to the left side because my thumb wants a little more space when it comes to pressing the spacebar, and this keyboard is not giving it to me. There's nothing ergonomic about having your thumb being placed at the edge of a key and accidentally pressing a key when you didn't want to multiple times. But with the Alice 80, because the spacebar is shifted over to the left a little bit, my thumb is now in a more comfortable position and I don't have to worry about it slipping over, touching the edge, or pressing another key, which I had issues with on the Q8. If I were to compromise and use the Q5 as a daily driver, I would have to curve my thumb. I would have to bend it in order for it to be in a proper spacebar position where it wouldn't press the extra function key, which is not very ergonomic at all. Weirdly enough, it's the opposite for the left spacebar, so my hypothesis is that the Q8 is better for left-handed users and the Alice 80 is better for right-handed users. But that doesn't mean the Q8 is a bad keyboard because it clearly isn't. It's just that the spacebar implementation went against the whole ergonomic standpoint of this design. An Alice keyboard is ergonomic, so it's supposed to be comfortable to the natural body position. So if you were to raise your hands up, you can see that your hands actually point inwards, which is why the Alice layout is designed as it is. And you might be wondering why it's uncomfortable to start typing on an Alice keyboard, and that's because for the past 10-15 years, you've been putting your hands like this and putting them together and typing like this unnaturally and been typing on a particular layout. So obviously there's going to be a bit of a learning curve going from this back to a more natural stance. But after a while, once you get past that learning curve, it's going to feel a lot better and your wrists are going to thank you for it. Luckily, Keychron has another Alice keyboard called the Q10, which is just a larger 80% version and has fixed the spacebar implementation. So if you want an Alice keyboard with Keychron keyboard quality, that might be a choice for you, but obviously it's going to be a little more expensive. For my final verdict, no matter how good the quality of the Keychron Q8 is, my choice in this comparison will always be the Feker Alice 80, and it's mainly because of that spacebar issue. Just because it's an issue for me doesn't mean it's going to be an issue for you. At the end of the day, an Alice keyboard is supposed to be comfortable, so if you use an Alice keyboard and it's not comfortable, you'll know within the first minute or so. If it's possible, find a friend with an Alice keyboard and try out their layout, and if the layout works, then find other Alice keyboards with that same particular layout because you know it's going to be comfortable. Don't try to compromise on a keyboard that doesn't feel comfortable. It's much easier to find a keyboard that fits your typing style than compromising and fitting a particular keyboard. But let me know what your thoughts are on both keyboards. Does the main issue make sense to you? And if you had an unlimited budget, would you still go for the Keychron Q8? Let me know in the comments down below. Links to buy both keyboards are also going to be in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.